And we're live. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the first meetup of the year, part 2 of our Ask Me Anything on product design. I'm Justin, joined by Liesl and Schalk, who I'm sure are familiar faces to you. And today we're going to just carry on with the questions that we didn't cover last time. But please feel free to ask any questions of us in the YouTube chat, and we will put them up on the screen and answer them as we go along. As usual, first things first, we just want to thank our sponsors. That's NML and IO, both software development companies in Cape Town, who've been supporting us for a long time, represented here by Liesl and I, respectively. And then Code Capsules, who sponsor our in-person events. They are a cloud hosting platform based in Cape Town as well, sort of like a South African version of Netlify. Recommend checking them out. And then Codespace Academy, who very kindly offer us a venue on the Saturdays when we host in-person workshops. So thanks very much to the sponsors. We're very grateful to them. They allow us to keep bringing these events to you, and we wouldn't be able to do it otherwise. Okay, so last time we collected a whole bunch of questions from people to discuss in the AMA, and we didn't get through. I mean, we got through like half of them, I think. And so we said we'd do a part 2, and that is today. And we've still got those questions. But as I say, please just type in the chat any questions that you have. They can be anything related to product design, and we will attempt to answer them as best we can. Okay, so I mean, I'll just move on to the first set of questions as a starting point, and we can take it from there. And these ones are all around technology and technological advances and how we deal with those, and around things like AI, staying up to date on design trends. Are there things we're excited about in terms of emerging technologies or platforms that can influence how we work as product designers? And how do we see, anything that might address challenges in collaboration, where we've got remote teams, we've got different disciplines all working together? I don't know. I thought for this one I would just start off by saying that most of us, when we're looking at tools, is we're working in Figma and probably FigJam as well. Miro is still going along. They just bought InVision actually, but I mean, for us, it makes perfect sense to keep all our tools in one place. So we're all in on FigJam. We no longer use Miros, but there are these various options with things. But Figma has gone all in on AI. Yeah, they've recently released a massive AI upgrade to FigJam that allows you to quickly and easily map out all sorts of things that were previously a very manual process. So there's definitely a big impact there. Figma is going to start introducing AI tools into the Figma product itself. These are inevitable, and I don't think they are, in my opinion, but again, please, Schalk, Liesl, weigh in here. AI is not the game changer people make it out to be, in my opinion, especially the large language models and things like that. They can do some things, they can't do everything. And they're really just anticipating what a human is asking of it more than anything else. The hype around AI is a bubble, in my opinion, much like Web3 and NFTs and Bitcoin and blockchain and so on. And it's just, VCs are throwing money at it, so it's everywhere. But these tools are going to be around. Personally, I mean, and again, this is just my personal take on it, they can be useful if we use them, if we work in a sense against them. And we evaluate and interrogate exactly what they're giving us. I don't know how other people feel about AI and design and what it's giving us. We've had, Schalk, we've had promises of, no code for how long now? 25 years. It's never really materialized or got into a usable state. And then, of course, there's the argument that, AI is, it's the worst it's the worst it's been today. Tomorrow it will be better. So there are all these things coming along. But I'm curious to hear other people's thoughts on that. I feel like I rambled there, but anyway.
No, that was great. Like I'll just adjust my volume. Like, no, like use the airtime while you have it, because one thing we learned last time is like once I unmute, like it's game over. Yeah, sorry if I seemed a bit distracted there. I was just like sharing the link on like all the socials and stuff, so people can join in. But yeah, as Justin mentioned, like I think if anyone has any specific questions while we're talking, like that would be phenomenal if you want to share them. All right. So from my side, generally, I think across development and all of those things, the I would say the consensus is that um, AI is both overvalued and undervalued at the same time. I think it's like it's undervalued in ways that we're not anticipating, and it's overvalued in the ways that we aren't anticipating. Um, so effectively, I think the areas where I do see, well, let me take a couple of steps back. Justin, have you played around with any of these kind of like AI design, quote unquote, tools? So whether that is Vercel's V0 or
Yes.
what is the other one? So there's this one called UIZ, which is kind of like wizard, but UI instead of WI.
I don't know that
I've
one.
I've played around with that one just for interest sake. Was at that time I was found it very underwhelming. Um, yeah, I'm curious whether any of you guys have played around with any of that.
So I played around with Vercel's tool.
Hmm.
And again, underwhelming. Um,
Hmm.
the code it produces for you is nothing that would ever get its way through a pull request review on my
Yeah,
team. There's just
and
no way. Um,
and in their
it's
defense, it is also called V0. So like
no,
it's meant
sure.
to, yes,
Yeah,
it's
no, but
meant to
same with
just
all
be a
these
starting
tools
point.
there. Yeah, it is
Hmm.
meant to be a starting point. If you need to quickly, whip up a prototype of a, drop-down menu, fantastic. You
Hmm.
can literally do it in a couple of minutes with a prompt. Yeah. So it's useful for things like that, but it also ties you in. All of these tools are going to tie you into their technological stack as well, and what they are all in on. So the Vercel tool, for example, like and this is not my opinion on these frameworks, but it locks you into, for example, SHAD CDN, a UI library. It locks you into Next.js. So, and of course, that's those Vercel's products. Yeah. So you're always going to be, when you're using these tools, you're always going to be a part of that product ecosystem, and that's something that I think we do need to be aware of. I do think they're useful for proof of concepts and things like that. They're really great for that. One thing that has kind of blown my mind is what Adobe's been doing with Photoshop. Um, it's quite phenomenal. I think the real danger in AI lies. It's not the AI overlords, taking over the humans. It's the potential for bad actors to just disseminate misinformation more than anything else. I mean, the kind of things that you can do within
Hmm.
Photoshop now, and
Yeah.
Illustrator for that matter. Illustrator, you can now generate fully formed, well-structured SVGs and illustrations just via text prompts. Photoshop, you can do anything you want with an image, again, just via text prompts. Those are phenomenal tools. I mean, the way they work, they really are incredible. But there is a large danger with them. I mean, we're already starting to see that in various things. I mean, in the news this week, there was a whole thing about, and especially as you get into politics in the US and elections and all these kind of fake things that are appearing. And these tools just make it so easy to do that. But you're always going to be locked into that vendor in some way. You're never going to be independent of it.
Liesel, I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Look, I can't speak from a technical perspective, and I can't really speak from a design perspective, but I think I would say it's just, like anything in life, it's balance, the one thing. And you don't want people to, well, I certainly don't want to see people not understanding the why. So, if you get it to generate certain menu types for you, you would want to understand why. So I guess what I'm saying is people shouldn't use that to skip the part where you're supposed to learn and understand. And I think that's, for me, that's the danger. That's the one thing I spot when people use AI. That's actually the only thing I'd want to point out. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to step in anything, but I think too many shortcuts and not understanding why decisions are made. I think especially in conceptualization and development, you want the team to understand why certain things are done and why decisions are made. So I just wouldn't skip on that.
Let me kind of go a bit deeper into that. So obviously, I think this is a bit of a rhetorical question, but why would that be important? Like, that's obviously not a virtue in itself. Why is it important to understand the why, practically speaking?
I just think that if you're doing a UX exercise, just taking something that AI generated wouldn't necessarily always make sense. So you would need to understand if what it's giving you is appropriate for the occasion or the action that needs to be taken. And that's why I think it's important.
So so as I mentioned, it was a bit of a rhetorical question. I obviously have my own take, and now I do see there's a question by Tenaya. Sorry, sorry. Like I probably did like 3 different pronunciations, and all of them were wrong. But yeah, I'm keen to. Oh man, and now my head is like hello. But okay, let's get to that, and then I'll maybe return to the AI thing. Oh,
trying to fix
Justin, it's a lost cause. Like, it's
maybe while you play around, I think
No, don't play around. Like, let's just take it for what it is.
There are obviously things that AI can do that can massively impact time, sitting and doing SVGs and like those mundane tasks. Sure, you can expedite and deliver much faster.
Yes.
I get that, but I think what I'm trying to say is, in terms of technical roles and design roles, people shouldn't taking the shortcut isn't always the best avenue to go. I think people need to still understand their discipline and why certain decisions are made, and understand the fundamentals. If I wanted to, I can sit now and knock out logos, and I have no design fundamentals. I wouldn't know if what the AI is giving me back is, by any stretch of the imagination, anything that is good. And so if I'd prefer getting a design or technical solutions from somebody that at least understands. So I think what I'm saying is it could create possible avenues for taking massive shortcuts and people skipping on understanding their discipline really well. That's just opinion based. So.
I think we mustn't, and I think this comment is a good one, because it distinguishes between what we're looking at as a conceptual understanding of something versus the tool we use to to reach at
Mm.
an end
Mm.
goal, and we should always keep those separate. Yeah, that the tool
So,
is a means, and it's not necessarily going to influence the way we do things, but we should always just regard it as a tool and nothing else.
yeah.
And I think that speaks to your point as well, Liesel, that if we just regard it as a tool, then we're not looking at it as something that's solving our problem. It's just another way of doing something technical. Yeah. And sure, I mean, things like ChatGPT can help you out immensely when you want to write a nasty email to someone, for sure. But
make this even more abrasive, please.
Yeah, really make this person
This
feel
is
bad.
too formal. Like, make it more, give it more of a dig and a
make it less polite.
spicy.
Yeah.
Make it more spicy.
But that's just
So
a tool, you know.
I've got a little tale. Somebody knocked up a presentation a while back, and they couldn't find an image, so they generated one, and it was a person waving. And luckily, the person reviewing it picked up that the person had six fingers.
I literally just wanted to ask you, like, how many fingers did the person? Well, yeah, like
6.
AI. That is like kind of the running joke. Is I don't know why, but AI really. There was this thing on Reddit where someone like had this device that you put on your finger that makes it seem like you have 6 fingers, and it's kind of but it was like, it's a joke, but the thing is, like, then any footage of you would be inadmissible in the court, because you would be able to say that, no, it was AI generated, look, there's like 6 fingers. I really appreciated that. But yeah, it's a running joke. Yeah. So
hey, we've got a couple more comments. Let's just get through them. Again, from Tanai, that's a good point. Use as a tool and not to replace the human. And taught how to properly use it, incorporating the why. Yeah, I think that speaks to the context and understanding the problem that you mentioned, Liesel. I very much agree with that. And then Jonathan, just that coding is the same. You know, you can churn out something that's functional as a component or something like that. I mean, I can go to ChatGPT right now and say, create this React component for me, make sure it's strictly typed. Have these states, etc., and it's going to do that for me. But how does that fit into the context of an entire application? It doesn't.
Yeah.
So we just need to be careful there. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. Yeah, I'm not against that in any way. Use the tools to help you, but just make sure you are interrogating the tool itself and not just taking it as something that is always going to be truthful.
Yeah. I kind of feel like if it's okay to use it if you can validate whether or not it's producing something of quality. If you're unable to tell whether or not this is giving you something back that is not quality, if you can't do that, you need to think about if you should be doing that. So there needs to be a validation in the middle, I think. And that's where the understanding, that's where the foundational knowledge that's needed to be able to make that assessment, isn't it?
So one thing that I actually observe in the coding world, and this is because I deal with a lot of students and so forth, and I've always taken the approach that like, as far as possible, I want to encourage students to use AI. I actually want to tell them to use AI because there's no point in emulating a world in academia that doesn't exist out there. Like if in the real world, like, AI is a reality, like, why are you trying to emulate? Isn't the point of academia to prepare you for the world that's coming? But that's a completely different discussion. I have some really hot takes on that. A lot of it is just I think education, tertiary education, has become over formalized. People in academia have become lazy, and and complacent and so forth and so forth. So I have lots of hot takes on that. I don't want to go into those, but like I definitely think if anyone is studying at a place or whatever and they're going to extraordinary lengths to prevent you from using AI, I think there's some deeper problems there, and they're not necessarily preparing you for the world that's out there. They're preparing you for some weird. It's for the sake of academia, not for practical experience. But anyway, so
I
it's like
absolutely
the
agree
point.
with that.
Yes. So, but what I want to say is one of the windfalls, I think, of AI. I'd be curious. I haven't really thought about the design side, but I've seen this on the coding side. Is paradoxically, it's actually forced people to have a better understanding of the fundamentals because you use language to converse with AI. That means you have to, if you want to use AI proficiently, you have to get a sense for what these things are called. So I think actually paradoxically it forces people to have a better understanding. Like let's say CSS, like you have to be like, cool, create a button for me that like has all the pseudo states needed for user interaction. And it shouldn't rely on any nested selectors or whatever. Like already like there's a level. And I think the fact that you can apply terminology and fundamental concepts to AI actually provides them with more value. Because one thing I've definitely found with students in the past, and Justin, you've probably experienced this with juniors as well, is like there's almost an aversion to the terminology. Because it's like, I don't need to know what this thing is called. Like, I just need to know how to make the button do the thing.
Exactly.
But the flip side of that is then you kind of go to MDN, and this is why people love W3 Schools so much, is because W3 Schools is like CSS, make thing good, make thing pretty, hover, make more pretty. That was an amazing Afrikaans like accent. But the point being, you go on MDN and now you see all these things, selectors, pseudo elements, specificity, all these fancy words, and it's so hard to figure out what the article is trying to tell you. So
exactly.
I'd actually be curious if you see. I haven't played around enough with AI in the world of design to actually know whether you have that same effect, but it would be interesting. Like does it to a certain degree force people to like learn the fundamentals and like learn what things are called in order to more proficiently communicate with AI? And I didn't mean like, oh, give me 10 wireframes or whatever. Like I can't think about an example now, but I don't know, like, let's say a state chart, you can probably get AI to come up with a really nice state chart in terms of, but you probably need to understand some basics of like state charts, like, so what are guards, what are effects, actions, how does hierarchy and like kind of parallel and like all and state machines and like all that stuff, which I think is very interesting. Is like it's kind of, there's this idea that AI is actually making people not understand what they're doing, and like I think there's definitely instances where it actually forces you to have a better understanding.
Because you're not, I think that's right. You're not going to get a good result out of any tool that you're using without being able to articulate the problem in the first place.
Exactly.
And to articulate that problem, you need to understand
what exactly you want.
And what you want.
And so I think the other thing as well is that like someone who's able to do that is able to use AI much more proficiently. So you don't need to do that. But I think in terms of opportunity cost, like it definitely makes understanding the underlying fundamentals like much more appealing, which I find very encouraging actually. But then you still get people who are like, make thing look nice, do UX stuffs and spit something out.
Yeah, I mean, and then all you're really getting from an AI tool is like some Medium blog post or something, because
A picture.
that's where,
Yeah.
or a picture. Yeah.
And you know, like, and once again, you know, like, what are things called? If you're talking about elements, you know, like, you know, what's the difference between modals and dialogues and tooltips, and then, you
And
know,
toasts, etc. Yeah.
what's the other one? There's these three. There's three of the so modals, dialogues. What's the other one?
Popovers. Toasts, popovers. No.
Yeah, like
No?
well, regardless, like all these things, like now all of a sudden you need to actually think more ontological about your design, which I think is a move in a right direction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Cool. I think there's something else
Yeah,
by
there's
Jonathan
another-
as well.
Yeah, there's another one from Jonathan just saying that you know, he's observed people picking up distance a little bit quicker by leveraging LLMs. You know, if you again,
Exactly.
this is also, you know, with an LLM,
Alumma.
who came up with that one? It doesn't really roll off the tongue, does it?
Yeah.
You know, the more you prod it, the better the better result you're going to get out of it. Yeah. I think there's a lot of danger into going into something and go like, ask one question and go, okay, there's my answer.
Yeah.
Always interrogate what's coming back from that. In the same way you would with a human, you know. We don't feel any qualms with having a discussion with a human about something to understand something better. Why not do it the same way?
And I think there's also a lack of appreciation of how much of the process of design is kind of that, how much happens in kind of that double diamond, the refinement part. So like AI is really great with the what do you call the first part where it kind of diverges? See, like I wouldn't be able to ask ChatGPT about that. But yeah, so effectively it's this idea that like creative processes, you have this initial divergence where you're literally just thinking about things, creating things, coming up with ideas. And then the second part is refinement, where you eliminate things to get to like the solution that you actually want. And I think there's an undervalue. I think the negation part of design is undervalued, and I think people tend to just think about the exploratory part without the negation part and like crossing out. There's this quote by now I forgot his name. Who's a kind of this Spanish, well-known, you would know, Justin, well-known like Spanish author. Like he had like all these. No, I think okay. Let me just Google it.
What kind of author, Schalk?
He had like this very like old school, like sorry, it's been a long day. You guys can probably see my brain is Hemingway. He was Spanish, right? Was he not?
No, he was American, but he lived in Spain and he fought in the Spanish Civil War, and then he moved to Cuba. And then he shot
there
himself.
You go. Okay. Well, there you go. But so Hemingway had this quote. Well, thanks, Justin. So Hemingway had this quote where I think it was Hemingway that said like writing is easy. You just cross the wrong parts. And it's the same thing. Like when you're writing, you're just like vomiting stuff on the page, and then you just like scratch out the stuff that doesn't make sense. And I think it's the same with design, and it's one of the first things I teach my students as well. So AI is really great for that ideation. That's the word I was looking for, the ideation phase. But at some point, like you need someone with enough know-how to start eliminating like that and be like, cool, there's this 5,000 solutions. Let's start trimming that down. Let's start testing things. Let's A/B test. Let's maybe do a bit of user testing. Let's maybe chat with the developers, see which one of these is actually easiest to maintain, and so forth. You know, so there's that entire world that AI is not able to do. AI is very good at the ideation. And I also do think, yeah, so, and I'll maybe say this in closing because I don't want to go on for too long about this, but this is something I've obviously spent a lot of time thinking about, because obviously I need to explain to my students, like, how does AI fit into the broader picture. I do think that most of the stuff that AI is really good at was probably not worth doing in the first place as part of your
Yes.
design process. If the work you're doing is very easily replaced by AI, I don't really think you were providing that much value. You were
Agreed.
probably creating too many artifacts. You
Mhm.
were probably too hung up on the visual side of things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and like, you were probably also creating too many things from scratch. I
Yeah.
honestly think, like, I think AI is just more in the general conversation nowadays, so it's much more prominent. But I actually think most of the stuff that AI has kind of supplanted have already been solved by design systems and material
Yeah.
UI, and you know,
I agree.
um, I don't think you should have been doing the stuff that AI is really good at that much, or spending
Mm.
all that much energy on creating these artifacts and whatever.
Well,
Instead of using AI to create a drop down for you, maybe just use an existing one that has been battle tested.
tried and
Um,
tested. Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I also do think there's a lot of, I personally think there's some big problems in the ways we do, a lot of people do kind of product design and stuff nowadays. And I actually think that AI is actually pushing us in a more useful direction,
Mm.
where the stuff it's actually able to, those really low value stuff, that looks cool, but doesn't add that much value. AI is actually really great at just doing that for you.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Completely
whether
agree.
that is like writing out like really basic like user stories, or whatever,
Mm. Mm.
it's really good at replacing the mindless work, or the
Yes.
work where there's a lot of, see, this is the thing about AI. AI is
Pause.
really good at doing work that's very predictable, and if the work you're doing is very easily replaced by AI, maybe that speaks to how standardized and automatable the work you are doing have actually been, and it was effectively just like on the cusp of completely losing any value.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
and
think that's a
let me
really
maybe,
important
sorry,
point.
like I said, I'm going to close half an hour ago, but let me close with this part. So I oftentimes on LinkedIn, I see like you know like people sharing like, oh, this AI tool created like all these logos and whatever, and like, logo designers, watch out, this is a game changer. And sure, the type of logos it creates is mediocre at best. It's possible. It's like, it's so if you were doing that type of work where it's effectively just like that level of logo design, which is kind of just above like clip art, effectively, I can't really see how you've been earning a living just pushing out logos as just a image. Like, obviously
Mm.
it's very different if you're doing like a full on like branding and
Yeah.
conceptualization of like
Mm.
a corporate image and all of that stuff, and AI can't do that. But if you were just like, this is Bob the plumber, and Bob the plumber wants a logo, and so his logo is just going to be a pipe with like
Oh,
sparkles, or whatever. Sure, AI replaces that, but I can't imagine that type of work having been of much value before. Cool,
agreed.
but let me stop there. Like, I really want to hear some other thoughts, except
I just want to add on to something that you said there. And Liesel, you and I have had this conversation before about wasted UX and UI work, where you're doing all this work that is largely irrelevant. Yeah, and I think we need to be very wary about getting into that trap. Yeah,
there's a lot
because
of performative work in in,
exactly
in,
a
in, in
ton
in
of
UX and
performative
UI.
UX work
Mm.
that's unnecessary. It's wasted. it should never go near a client, but it is often used as a way to justify certain things like billing and so on. Yeah. So, and AI is, it's tempting to do more and more of that because AI speeds up those kinds of processes quite significantly. There's another comment here. I think this is a really important one. Do you think with access to LLMs and access to AI tools that there will be more expectation for design unicorns and people in product?
I like unicorns. But yeah, probably unicorns.
And people in product that can wear multiple hats due to access to this info. I can tell you that CEOs love this stuff because they see AI as a way to save money. And I think we, as people in the workforce, need to be very, very careful about what happens with this. Because we're already seeing, massive layoffs in the tech industry. It's not a good time. None of these layoffs are necessarily happening because companies are in trouble. And a lot of CEOs, bad CEOs, are going to jump on AI as a way to say, oh, well, I don't need 10 people on my team. I only need 2 and some AI tools. So there's definitely going to be a lot of pressure happening there. Yeah. I don't have any solution to that. We are at the vagaries of how the, capitalism works, right? There's nothing we can do about that. So I think there's going to be a lot of pain, to be honest. But I also think that pain is going to be short-lived because there's just going to be all-round failure when people start to do that. Yeah. So yeah, the short answer to your question is yes, I do think that's going to happen. And I think there's going to be a lot of pressure within the product design space and within the developer space from AI tools, from people in positions of power, holding onto the purse strings, who are going to make poor decisions based on this. That's going to have a human cost, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And it's going to be the wrong decision, and they're going to find that out when it's too late. Yeah.
Mm.
I just want to quickly comment. I shared a link in the chat to there's a really great couple of articles on Duolingo, who I think effectively kind of reduced the entire content team down to 2 people, and replaced everything else with AI. So I think that's definitely what you're talking about. And we can talk about my personal take is that the work that AI replaces is work that shouldn't have been done really in the first place. But that is in an ideal, rational world where value is apparent, self-apparent. And that's not the case, in terms of clients want, in terms of what the CEO thinks is important, all of that, perceived value is much more important in the short term than actual concrete value. Concrete value is usually more often than not something you only realize retrospectively, that's actually what the value was. But so unfortunately, I'm of the opinion that AI is actually not going to really add that much value apart from just replacing the stuff that wasn't really that valuable in the first place.
Agreed.
But that doesn't change the fact, as Justin said, that it has perceived value.
Yes,
and
exactly.
CEO
That's the whole
is going
crux
to make,
of it,
a company is going to make decisions based on perceived value, not based on necessarily actual value. And so they're going to fire the entire design team because they think AI is going to be able to replace that. And maybe the design team was actually doing stuff that's not useful, but they kind of felt like they had to do those things. So
it will be contextual. I mean, some organizations will get by fine,
But in general,
normal
like
way.
my recommendation for people would just be like, be really hard, really interrogate what concrete value are you providing.
Yeah.
And I think this is both like designers are getting a bit of a double whammy now with the recession as well, because I do think that in tech teams, the first people to go would be the designers, because
Yeah.
you can't really fire the people writing the actual code. If you have to make a trade-off between making the thing look pretty and not having the thing, um, you're gonna. So, like, I think, like, really, like, my advice to my students for the last 2 years as well, because I think most people in the industry saw this recession, saw this bubble that's going to burst in a year. You can ask any of my students from the last 3 years. I've been telling them, like, from 3 years ago, like, be really mindful about the value you provide, be able to articulate concretely how the organization would be worse off with you not there right now. And I don't mean in terms of user delight and all of those things. I'm talking about, like, actual bottom line, like, how are you actually providing value? And it sucks, but the people who've been able to do that have kind of survived, like, the waves of recession and AI and all these things that have kind of flooded us the last year. Yeah. Sorry, Liesel, please say something.
No, I'm nodding along because my answer to that question is also yes, it's going to happen. But I think just coming back to my comment right at the beginning is the foundational knowledge and there's like experience. The term people in product is a very loose term. Product is very complex. I don't know if anybody has actually. So I'm in the process of studying it a little bit, and it is overwhelmingly complex. It is a beast of its own. So I think I totally agree with you. Having knowledge, having experience, and understanding value, I think that's where it lies. And let the AI do the rest. If it makes you faster in rolling out in assets, I mean, absolutely do it. But I think, and it's also something that we discussed in a previous conversation, is I think there is something that happens when a person applies some kind of thinking process, and you never want to take that away from a human. Something, we all have, you can sit the whole day, work on a bug, and the moment you start explaining it to another person, something just falls into place. I typically sit with a piece of paper and I start drawing out whatever I want to do, and it falls into place. We all have different thinking avenues, and I think your ability to think and be pragmatic and logical, those are all things that's valuable to me if I look at people. So you don't want AI to replace that. So I'm not 100% sure what people in product means, but probably all of the above. But it's definitely going to happen. It's already happening.
It's already happening, yeah.
But like with the human race, we always in hindsight. So I guess we'll have to see what happens.
Yeah.
How that pans out.
If we thought that AI was like a can of worms, like, and I think there's maybe some value in unpacking a bit, like, what, because I think we were hinting at it last time and we never really got to it, is like unpacking what we mean by product and what we mean by product design, and and those things. And I actually think AI is making that a much more important discussion to have, because once again, you have all these artifacts that are becoming less relevant purely because AI can spit them out. So if you're not making artifacts, what is it that you're doing? If your work was spending 5 hours making wireframes, spending 4 hours making mockups, spending 2 hours writing, what do they always used to call? I hate, when I studied, we had them like kind of like almost advocating for your design. I almost want to say like motivation or whatever. Yeah, like, or so then the question is like, if the AI is able to do those things super easily for you, like what is it that you actually do as a designer? If it's not creating artifacts. Yeah. That was a real question.
I don't want to answer that. I don't
Okay.
want to.
Yeah, I can take a stab at it, but like maybe we should just talk about some other things first, so that I don't go on a monologue again.
All right. We can end with your monologue.
There you go.
Shall
Grand
I
finale.
I'll bring back the questions we had. I think the
let's
next
do that.
slide is actually very. I mean, there's some other things here, questions we had there around, staying up to date with trends and things like that. But I think let's rather move on to this one, because I think this has a lot in common with what we've just been discussing, which is around workflow efficiency and consistency and working across multidisciplinary projects and things like that. And I think that ties quite interestingly into when we're talking about new tools and things that we're using and how that influences that. So I'm just going to take that away. I will remember the gist of the questions is around, design workflows and how they fit into the life cycle of a product. And this might get us also to answer your question, Schalk, around, what is product design? Again, I don't really have an answer here. I mean, I have my ideas about how a design process should work and implement them to the best way that I possibly can in my workplace. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's the right way to do it. It's all contextual. And it's also changing all the time. I don't know, Liesel, how you do things at I/O from a product design perspective. There are all these usual things around, start with your, user research and your personas, and then do this, and it's all this thing, and we all know this, right? It's not something we need to learn. But this always again brings me back to this whole idea of what is that work we're doing? How much of it is just busy work, which is a large part of the conversation we've been having.
I think it
Performance.
depends a little.
What is the point of a persona, for example? I hate that stuff.
Some dangerous words right there. Okay.
I'm not saying don't know your users. Of course, you need to know your users, but
you're not allowed to do personas. You heard it straight from Justin.
Well, actually, we aren't. Well, we don't do that. What's the point? We're making up stuff, man. It's all imaginary most of the time. It's an idealized idea of what a user is. It never gets updated. It just becomes, it's busy work, and it becomes, this is a disclaimer, my opinion.
Yeah, but I want to,
and you just end up with a nice artifact that's nicely designed with a stock photo of someone, and then their interests and their hobbies and their LSM level, whatever.
That chick with the red, that chick with the red sweater, that is like the first like you see her in all the personas and stuff, because I think it's, if you go on Unsplash and you search for like profile photo or something, like that's like on the first page.
Yeah, or there's that one guy in a suit with dreadlocks who fits like a certain thing that people want, so you always have that. And it just gets filed away in some, FigJam file or something, or you've got a Figma file called personas. It drives me mad because we never go back to it. It doesn't get validated in any way. It's a busy work. But anyway. So if you want to talk about efficiency in processes, look at what's not giving you value in the process. Sorry, Liesel, I'm going on.
No, I've never seen in my lifetime personas being used efficiently. So speaking as a non-designer, I felt that they've always been useless. And so I agree with you, cut out. So we work on a lot of early stage. So I think the processes also has to align a little bit to where you start in the process. Like, is your innovation or ideation stages done, or do you need to incorporate them? And because we do early stage, we have to be very pragmatic in what we pick to do, because there isn't budget and there isn't timeline.
Yeah, it's just lean. It's a lean process
Very,
by
very, very
definition.
lean. Yeah, very lean. And fast and efficient, and Figma's sharing capabilities are great. Our designers tend to want to hide a little bit in a sandbox environment until they're happy to. You don't want people in there too early, but this is just what they tell me. So they tend to shy away from being too open very early.
That is one of my
Is that
biggest
killing
pet
you? Is it
peeves.
killing you?
It's
Yeah,
like
I don't like that either.
if you are working with me on a team, like you need to get over that. Like like I'm very
Look, I don't.
radical in terms of designing in the open
Yeah, yeah.
because like
Well, we're
Yeah.
not militant over it, right? So,
I am.
at some point, you have to work out in the open. But especially like on something where you're ideating a new brand from scratch and there's only a paint smudge. I don't know what value you're going to have if somebody pops in there. So I think, different strokes for different folks. But it depends on what it is that the designer is working on. If it's a UI
Yeah.
interface, I mean, there's no problem in that. But somebody who's going through an artful process, maybe it's good to not disturb him at that point. So I'm just speaking for an array of designers here, not just a certain one.
No, I'm not talking about like like I definitely like I once again, it's that kind of ideation refinement. But what I'm talking about is like not having a shared source of truth.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is having some secondary hidden like thing that's the real place, and this is just the one that the official one.
Yeah.
No, like to me, I'm very militant in terms of there's only one, and you need to get over your fear that people are going to laugh at you because we're all going to work in the open and like without any disclaimers of this isn't ready yet. Like
Yes.
we're working on the thing. But anyway,
Yeah.
I think like if
With
you come
this-
from a coding background, like I think with code reviews and pair programming and stuff, that's maybe a bit more natural to you. I do think that people who've only experienced the design world, and I think it comes from university days or whatever, where you get a brief and you disappear for a week and then you show up and hand in your project.
Yeah.
Whereas I think if you come from if you've kind of dabbled a bit in the development side of things, you'll actually realize like how everything is just out there and you see everything. There's no disappearing and coming back.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed that developers are taught from the beginning those principles, but I've always like I don't think it's news to anybody. Designers tend to shy away from that. We are breaking down the boundaries a little bit and like making headway in it, but I definitely think it's harder for designers to take that step.
And for me, like one of the reasons personally for me why that was hard, like so I have a formal background in design, like the tech stuff, the coding stuff I kind of learned in practice, is that I think there are a lot of very weird pop culture notions about what design entails and about like originality and whatever. So you want to like copy Airbnb and you want to like take a screenshot of this other app and literally just trace over it to create your kind of search bar or whatever. And I do that, like I'm like, hey, let me take a screenshot of this product which is very similar to, and literally just use that as reference as I'm designing, and it'll start diverging from there. So I think designers have have a very, or just in general, people have a very strange notion about design and originality and whatever. So you want to hide that part. You want to hide the
Yeah.
part where you're taking screenshots and looking at other people's solutions and copying them. Whereas I think in
And your
coding,
Figma
like,
file is a mess of references and
yeah, like
experiments.
I take a screenshot, put it at 50% opacity. I design over the parts that I can reuse. Yeah, and like it's a whole thing of like, like everything is a remix or whatever.
Yeah, I think there's
Yeah.
also an obsession with being done that with
Yes.
designers,
Yeah.
whereas and maybe it's the nature of the way developers work these days, where you work in sprints or whatever it might be, and at the you're not hopefully doing like a waterfall thing and you're working and then it's done. You're just continuously in the process of creating stuff from a coding perspective.
And I think it's also an obsession with artifacts once again.
Yes, exactly. With
like,
delivering this artifact that is now finished.
And
it's okay for everyone to see it. Yeah.
And the visual is just a ground conversation.
Exactly.
But I think once again, Justin, you and I are very much on the same page in terms of your source of truth should always be code. Yeah. So the design, like Figma, shouldn't be your source of truth.
Never.
Like that is effectively just like a visual guide to make changes in the same way on a paper napkin you'd like sketch out ideas. To me, it's the same. The actual thing that you look at, that is the actual real thing that gets cataloged and documented and whatever, to me would always be in code. So I don't know, like I see all these massive like Figma files with components. Like once again, those should that shouldn't be, like in my experience, like components in Figma and all that stuff should be to aid your process of getting it into code. They shouldn't be a means in themselves. I see that so many times where like the Figma files are treated as the source, and then the code is kind of treated as the afterthought. Is like,
code is just,
it's literally just like hacking, like so that you keep a record and you're like and the thing that's your source of truth that you keep up to date as closely and as like with as many like iterations as possible as the design file, and then the code is just kind of like an afterthought in terms of realizing that thing which is the real thing. I don't know. Yeah, sorry, I said I was going to shut up.
No, Schalk and I, we very much agree on this, that the design artifact that you produce is not your source of truth. It lives within your code, and your code is a living entity rather than the Figma. And I also absolutely agree. I mean, we are big in on design systems in Figma itself, using components, using libraries, using variables, using styles, all the things that Figma gives you. But as you say, as an aid to development, and as a byproduct, an aid to be able to move really fast in Figma.
And in my experience, it's a representation of what's going on in the code. So in the same way that a map is an abstraction of the like kind of the actual world, like the world itself. Like to me, once again, like I see people will rebuild the entire app in Figma, like where they have like all the prototypes and everything wired up, and it's like and they kind of use variables and all that stuff to emulate like actual software behavior. It's like you're literally rebuilding the app in a GUI in a GUI tool, and then you have to go and look at all of that and throw that away and actually start coding the app. Like it should always just be enough to communicate an idea. Like the designs is, and I think this is like, to me, is like my biggest pet peeve, is the designs are never a means in themselves. But the reason why people do that is because they want to put cool stuff in their portfolio. You don't want to. Yeah, like no, I'm convinced that's the primary reason. Yeah, is like because you can put that in your portfolio. You can't say in your portfolio, go look at google.com or whatever. I was involved in that. And you can't even show what part you did. But anyway,
Yeah.
There's
But
a question by
I think-
someone. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to say one more thing on this.
Yeah.
Now I've lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, I think the other reason that people go all in on building and prototyping and mapping out and high fidelity design of every single screen that they possibly can also has a lot to do with the way design has been presented to stakeholders and clients in the past, where it's very hard to convince a client that it's not the design that they must be concerned with. It's the actual code and application they must be concerned with. And if there are issues there, that's where the issues lie. Yeah, you can use the design for exploration, for figuring things out, all the things that we do need to do, but that should never be, as we say, the source of truth. It drives me absolutely nuts when people will design a web application that's got, say, 12 screens, and then they design 12 screens for desktop, 12 screens for iPad, 12 screens for a phone. Why are you doing this? This is, again, busy work. It's an absolute waste of time. You can do that in code in like no time at all. If you've got a really complicated component that you need to have a visual representation of how it might look on a phone, for example, fine, do the component. But this idea that we are recreating all these things, and it goes all the way back to that we've never quite managed to get design processes in line with dev processes. But design is still so waterfall, and it's what clients expect as well. And unless we can get beyond that, we're going to be stuck with this problem. Okay, enough ranting from.
I just want to say that, like, sorry, Liesel, and then the floor is all yours. Like, people tuning in tonight's probably, can these two old white men just shut up? Like, 100%. I'm on board with that.
Yeah,
I think this is the least useful people that could be contributing to this discussion. But man, I have a hard time helping myself because I'm so passionate, and you can probably tell Justin is also so passionate about this. Let me also just say that I do think a lot of that has to do with like actually just like processes. So you know, like waterfall and all that stuff. And man, now I forgot the other thing I was about to say. Okay, maybe Liesel, this is your time to kind of continue that thought, and then I'll jump in a bit later.
Maybe something else sparks your memory. No, I kind of want to say, look, if I just talk from a business perspective, sometimes you are required to produce a prototype before the next budget is signed off. So just from a practical business perspective, and you know, you can't always, as an organization, go every product, every client, they all have a different requirement from you as an organization on what you produce. So, you know, you got to be a little bit flexible there. You know, so for instance, we're going through a process now where phase 1 is discovery to prototype. That's all they're giving us budget for. We are going to have to produce some artifacts to get to that point. It's not going to be a coded prototype. It will be a Figma prototype. And that's, you know, that's how the cookie crumbles. You want to do the job. It's a cool job. But that gets you to phase 2, which is the build phase. And of course, we still have all the design iterations that happen within there. We stay in. So it's sometimes a little bit of a relationship between a little bit of waterfall and agile. But I think in the case of this, it's really to prove that, you know, there's a concept here and we know what we're going to build, as opposed to just starting willy-nilly. I think, you know, there's also a pro and a con argument for all of these things. So I can really only speak from a business perspective. Where we do client work versus product, or early stage product or startup work, we can control the process a lot more. and we can make that as flexible as we want because we're in control. If the client is controlled, the game is different. If I'm not necessarily, when quoting on a job or getting a job into the organization, going to change the way that a corporate is functioning. I'm afraid that's not going to happen. Like, you can advocate and teach while you do this and say there's a better way, and you can plant those little seeds, but you can't always pick and choose. So, if you have to do client work, there's a different way of looking at versus being in control of the product. It's a completely different world.
No, 100%. And you get that on the at the lower levels as well. Like a client might be the button needs to be purple because purple symbolizes energy and whatever. And you're like, what bullshit is this? But the thing is, you understand that and you work with that. And you navigate that space, and I think what I'm not necessarily seeing always is people actually navigating that space. They just down that Kool-Aid with the client instead of being like, cool, like the client, we need to work with them. They don't necessarily have that good of a grasp in terms of what is of use, and that's why they're actually paying us money, because if they knew, then they would just do it on their own. And I think what I do see a lot of times is people using that as justification to scratch their own itches in terms of creating amazing looking things that cost a lot of resources and at the end of the day don't really solve that many problems. What I did want to say, so it came to me while you were speaking, is I think it's also important to note that this isn't something that I came up with. This isn't something that Justin came up with. It's not like everyone is just happy-go-lucky designing, and you have these two jaded, angry people that are like, oh, design is insanity in 2024. There are a lot of prominent people actually talking about these problems. I think I can say it's a direct quote. I think John Mardiak said that design in this day and age is in a crisis. So, there is some discussion happening about this, and we don't really, as you mentioned, Liesl, don't really know the way out of this, because you have all these client things, you have all these existing momentum and inertia pushing design processes in a certain direction, and then but this acknowledgement that we need to move away from that, but no one really knows how, or it's this massive ship, and but anyway, and it's very hard to just even tweak it in a little direction. One thing though that I've had a lot of success with, and I'm saying this as someone who's done work for National Treasury, if you want to talk bureaucracy, if you want to talk waterfall, they want to know in 3 years where that 5 cent is going to be spent. In 5 years, you need to say exactly what page you're going to designing on this date, at this time in 5 years. So, but I think, and with some other clients I've had as well, where I've had a lot of success is not saying don't create wireframes, not saying don't create mockups, but seeing that as a service that is separate from the process of product design. So you might need to create mockups. So some projects that I work on, not nowadays anymore in this climate, but back in the day when there was still a lot of seed funding floating around, you would actually design prototypes in Figma, and that would be presented to get seed funding for an idea before you even have the money to hire developers. But the thing is, you see that as something different. You see that as doing that for a specific purpose, for a specific goal, and not as part of the actual product design thing itself, And I think that's sometimes where it gets lost, is people conflate that with the process of building the thing. Sometimes you have to generate assets for other purposes, whether it's for marketing purposes or whatever. But that is not part of actual product design bona
I'm
fide.
trying. I
Yeah.
try and move away in my head from the product design term, and I'm pushing for product development, because I think that product design word, design is just too prominent in it. Like, people have an expectation of that, where you're 100% right. It's people should be more worried about the technical solution in the background than what the design looks like. And it's a team activity. It's not just a design activity. So I always feel like product development speaks a little bit better to that process. I don't know.
I would push back against that, just knowing that. So in Agile, so one of the roles is developer, but it's nothing to do with code. It's like you are, once again, like as you mentioned, you're part of the development team for the product. But I think there's this cultural idea of developer and development being coding. So like most people, the moment they hear product development, they're going to think like, oh, so you write code. It's just like, to me, it's one of those terms that I just try and stay away from, because it's like the moment you come near it, people think, oh, coding. But yeah.
But I think that's exactly what I'm trying to say about product design. So show me what it's going to look like. I want to see what it's going to look like.
Yeah, but it's because we're fixated with what is it going to be code? Is it going to be a design, instead of actually a product design as a process, as decisions, not artifacts.
Yeah.
But all right,
Yes,
Justin,
that's
throw
the
us some.
crucial thing. Yeah.
Yes, throw us some
Question.
of those questions. Yes.
What's the recommendation of each of us on how to start studying system design? Schalk?
So I would assume that specifically refers to system design in the context of design systems, and
I would imagine so.
My advice, saying this as someone who is in the world of tertiary education, I can say that be hesitant to go study design, whether through like an online course or actual degree or whatever. And I say this completely transparently, and I'll say this to my students as well, is because this is still, things are still so much in flux, that most of us like are still trying to figure it out. So I would be very wary of some formalized curriculum. So I wouldn't, but what I would advocate, and I tell my students to do this regardless of any of the curriculum stuff I do with them, is start creating your own internal repository of references. Go on Shopify, not Shopify, like Amazon. I don't know. Give me Steam. What all big web apps? Even Google Docs, Facebook, LinkedIn. Take screenshots, like reverse engineer it for yourself conceptually. How do the pieces fit together? Like, how do things relate? That is where, like, I tell my students to do this regardless as well, because one day when you're working, you're going to have this internal storehouse that you're going to draw on in terms of, hey, like, what are some ways in which you can do a search bar or whatever. So first and foremost, you're already starting that process of creating this inner catalog of references for yourself. And also you're kind of reverse engineering things that other people do in terms of getting a sense for how they make decisions. Where do things go? Like, why is this thing bigger than that thing? And you start seeing these patterns. Because, and I often say this, I often equate I don't know if she hears my daughter in the background, but I think this is very topical now, because I often say, so she's learning how to speak at the moment, and like she doesn't go and sit down and memorize the entire dictionary, and then she's like, okay, now it's time to speak. Like she just like goes at it, and like blah, 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 and then sometimes useful stuff comes out, and she gets the reinforcement like, oh, nice, wow, and she kind of capitalizes on that, and she tries and refine that and say the word papa or whatever better, and that is always my advice as well. I do feel there's an overemphasis in terms of theoretical knowledge and understanding things before attempting them. Whereas I would just recommend like just having a go at it, like try and build things, try and reverse engineer things, try and build your own versions of things, and then retroactively look at how the theory helps you make sense of that. Justin,
that's a very good approach. Good practical way to do that. I also think just interrogate or design systems that are out there. There's so many of them. So many of them are freely available. I mean, Shopify, as you mentioned,
I think there's this called Polaris.
Polaris, you can go and check that out. There's the Adobe one, which is a great example.
Big one is material design.
There's material design. I mean, there's so many out there that you can actually just go and interrogate. And then I always say, I mean, the best place to start thinking about design systems is Brad Frost and reading his Atomic Design book.
But
whether you take that on board conceptually, and you go with that model, that's contentious. But the idea of thinking in that way, and one thing that he's very good on is, like, as Schalk said, looking at what makes up a system and documenting it.
So once again,
but don't take it in a dogmatic kind of way.
And also don't. I would recommend you gaining some practical experience first.
Absolutely.
Because, like, once again, like I think Justin, you and I have the benefit of, at the time when stuff like Atomic Design and so forth came out, we were already kind of practitioners in the field. So it helped us make sense of stuff that we've seen and give language to that and give ways to talk about that. What I've seen is people like start with that material and treat it as if it's a guide in terms of how to do things, because there are dangers like over modularization and and like, for example, for someone who's been doing design practically for a long time, things like, okay, what's the difference between atoms and molecules and that stuff, like, but there's a certain understanding of, cool, what are those levels, just from the experience of having designed a lot of things, knowing where those levels kind of sit. For someone who's completely new, you are just going to get an anxiety attack trying to figure out when is something an atom, when is something an element, when is something a component. So my advice is always just practice first and foremost above all. And the books and the theory and whatever should help you give language and retroactively help you understand the practical stuff that you've seen and done and experienced and built. Like, there's a level of muscle memory. And I think that's sometimes taken for granted.
I think you touched on something really important there as well, and that's the ability to articulate what you're doing.
100%. And once again, ChatGPT is actually making that of more value, because the better you are asking ChatGPT to do something for you, the better you are articulating that same thing to stakeholders.
And it's
a phenomenal book.
Important.
There's a phenomenal book, O'Reilly book called Discussing Design. That changed my career.
Amazing book.
It's a bit of an oldie one. It's a bit oldish now, but it's like this. The cover has like two birds on it or whatever. That's probably my number one recommendation for any designer. But okay.
Put it in the chat.
Cool. Liesl.
Right.
Sorry, we haven't even got into Liesl yet.
Do you want me to weigh in? I was going to say practical experience, but you said it yourself. And then the other recommendation I would have is to identify maybe a mentor or somebody that you can have perhaps conversations like this with,
Very
and
good idea.
talk through. But that's really, yeah. I think if you have a little bit of experience in other design parts, you'd be able to slowly
Yeah.
but surely build up that. And yeah, have knowledge share sessions, have people
Yes.
review
Yeah.
your work, ask for feedback,
And if
Join
all
that
those
meetup.
isn't
little
happening
things.
in if that isn't happening in your organization, just make it up, start it. Yeah. Nothing stopping
And
you.
if your company doesn't want you to have knowledge share sessions, a flag should go up.
Yeah.
And also,
Bright red.
like, yeah, and everyone doesn't always have this luxury, but if you're looking at changing a job in future, or you're looking for a job right now, I would encourage you to be wary of jobs where you are the only designer, or I
Yes.
would also discourage people from starting out freelancing. Generally, that's my advice, because there's so much you learn from just seeing other people do this stuff. And at some point for myself, there's definitely been people in my career where I almost find myself asking myself, like, what would they do, like what would they say, like almost in the back of my head. And then
Yeah.
it's like
Same
there's
for
all
me.
that, like there's a reason why kind of an apprenticeship model works, with whether it's for a blacksmith or whatever, because like there's something about observing how people more
Yeah.
senior than you solve the problem. But yeah,
That's why our in-person sessions are quite popular, because it's practical and we try and show people how to do something, or get industry leaders to come and show us how things should be done. Not everybody has that luxury to have a big team, but there are ways to get
Yeah.
the information.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. From Teresa. What UX design practice is useful and efficient in the workplace if, for example, personas are not really used?
what have you done, Justin? Huh?
I have put it out there. Right. Okay. Can I answer quickly on this one, and then
Can I
everyone else
maybe
can
just
go
quickly
ahead?
weigh in? And this is going to be a
Yeah.
real quickly one. This isn't going to be like a fake quickly one.
Go
I
for
still
it.
do personas, but like
Okay.
I just like, it's okay. It's okay. I still like you.
Leaving.
But like, I think maybe the way I do personas would not necessarily coincide with how people think about personas that they see on Dribble or Behance or whatever. So first and foremost, for me, personas are like a means to write user stories. So personas are a starting place for me in terms of user stories. So you start with, cool, these, and it's a grounding place for assumptions. And I think the key here, Justin, that you mentioned, is validation. If you're not
Yeah.
going to validate your personas, leave it. It's a waste of time. Okay. So, but if you are doing any type of validation or actual chatting with users, personas give you the means to actually group behavior into logical buckets. So so you have an app. So for example, I'm doing product design for and UI engineering for software that integrates with like Amazon and Takealot and all those things. That it's a dashboard that allows users to kind of historically track their sales and whatever. And there are various reasons why someone would want to use that. But the key is personas are almost a retroactive thing. They come out of research. You don't create the personas. Like if you're sitting there coming up with ideas for a persona like that, you're doing that wrong. To me, personas are a way, they're literally just a way to articulate patterns of user behavior based on actual things that you observe. But the problem is, and I think this is why I said this was going to be fast. It's quick. Okay, let's stop it there. Justin, go ahead. Sorry.
But would you loosely then link them to certain roles? So a manager would want to use the application in this manager. However, yeah. Okay.
So
you need to know what their hobbies are to do that.
And do you like? There's a sliding scale of like what introverted, extroverted. I'm being facetious here. Like man, students love doing that thing. It's like
are they analytical or creative? Are they
but it's like
then
my question is always like, so oh man, like at the very least, let me say this. This is where I'll maybe be hardline. If you do personas, do not do sliding scales, okay?
No,
and my students are always like, why not? And so I ask them, okay, cool. So there's like, okay, someone is a 4 out of 5 for technical literacy or whatever. And I'm like, okay, cool. What is the difference between someone that's 3 out of 5 and 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 5? What does 4 out of 5 mean? And then they're like, oh, that probably means that, they have a tablet or whatever, but they're not comfortable using a laptop or whatever. And I'm like, just write that down.
Yeah.
Like that. Think about what it means and write that down. Don't do a sliding scale of cryptic numbers. But anyway, sorry.
But even then, what problem is that helping you solve?
Yeah. And
because I don't see it. Yeah.
I mean, but once again, like I think to me, if I'm not doing personas that are very closely tied to user stories, like I'm not going to do that.
They're useless,
and so what personas help me do is, so you have your user stories, that is kind of how you define your work to be done. So you're like, so it's a classic thing of, as a user, I want to be able to do X so that I can get X value. So every time you don't want to be like, as someone who is a single mother, but also, likes to watch cooking shows and whatever I want to do. So personas become nice stand-ins for user stories. So you can just say, as... And don't give your personas names. I don't know.
No, please don't.
Don't be like Jonathan Smith or whatever. Just be like, be like online seller or whatever. Okay.
Yes.
Let's we're gonna get a lot of hate in the comments.
That's okay.
Go ahead.
The other thing here as well is that you absolutely have to tie things to user stories, and within that you are, in a sense, as you mentioned, Schalk, doing some kind of work around personas, because you do need to know who your users are, but you don't need to know. I mean, let's say, for example, like
you don't need to know what their dog's name is.
No,
or what their favorite brands are.
We work on like a banking apps investment platform. I don't need to know if someone's introverted, or whatever it might be. Who's going to care about that? It's absolutely irrelevant. And then the other thing that grinds my gears is you produce these dribble-worthy persona designs, and it's all beautifully laid out, and there's a stock photo. As we've mentioned this already, how much time are you wasting on that? It is crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And again, it's Schalk, what you always say, where the artifact trumps the process. If you go straight into the process and you start writing those user stories, you are way along the line of solving your problem than if you spent a week getting the CI branding into the persona template. Please throw that stuff away.
So I also don't want to go into this. I don't want to go into this into too much depth. But I also want to mention that when I'm talking about user stories, those aren't actual extra things you do. Kind of the type of flows that I work in, kind of very lean and agile processes. The user stories are your definitions of work to be done. So in the way that you would have a Trello cards or whatever, that would be your user story. It's not you make a user story and then it's like, okay, I need to make the thing blue. That is literally the piece of work you give someone. They need to
doesn't live in
solve
your
this
design
user story.
tool.
Yes,
doesn't live in your
exactly.
design
So that
tool.
is like, I also have to give that distinction. So, but anyway, like, geez, this is like,
No.
this is like Justin and Schalk get angry and Liesel sits and listens.
I'm learning, but I think this is worth its own discussion.
Yeah, agreed. We should probably move on.
But I think one thing is like what I would like to shift the focus to a bit is like, okay, given that like there's all this stuff that you should be careful of, like what are actual proactive things that you can actually do instead? Like what are actual processes that are helpful, given that we've established some things are actually not that helpful? Justin, I'd be curious what you would say, given just like kind of the role that you play.
Okay, so user journey maps are, for me, one of the most important things you can do. And Scott, what you were mentioning about state mapping, those are absolutely crucial for any application. You cannot build an effective application without doing that. And to my mind, that's where you start. You don't start with who is my user, this person, or whatever that might be, because you're never going to nail that down anyway. Sorry, I keep going back to that. I didn't mean to. But yeah, so something that gets totally left out of the user experience conversation, to my mind, and particularly in South Africa, I think, is information architecture. We're not spending nearly enough time on information architecture, where we actually are interrogating, how does this system work? What is the hierarchy? What is the entry point? What is the end point? How do all these things connect to each other?
That is great. If you do one thing right now, like I already mentioned, discussing design, go and read How to Make Sense of Any Mess by Abby. I think it's COVID. It's free online. You can read it for free online. Given the online, I have it actually. I'll get it in a second. I have an actual copy of it. Granted, the online version is not that nice in terms of typography and stuff. It's a bit, I don't know, but it's free. It's free, So if you don't want to buy the book, then read the online one. But the online one isn't that nice to look at, though. And I'm saying this with like all the love. If you're listening to this, Abby, like I love the work. I'm just not a big fan of how the online version is styled.
Yeah, absolutely agree. That's a really, really great book. So my 2 cents there. Information architecture, we are not spending nearly enough time on it. It doesn't seem to get, maybe it's just me, but it just doesn't seem to get spoken about in South Africa. I mean, if you go to like the UX conference or whatever, no one's ever talking about information.
I think I think in South Africa there's a preoccupation with design as a picture.
I'll tell you what we preoccupied with is wireframes. That's another story. I think that's also busy work. But anyway, right, so that's, my 2 cents there is like IA, not AI, and just mapping things out, having a visual representation of the states of your application, because there you're solving design problems and you're also solving development problems at the same time.
Because computers think in mutually exclusive states. So the more you are able to consider your designs as mutually exclusive states, the easier it's going to be to implement. At its root level, when you think about binary, 1 and 0, these are mutually exclusive states.
Yep.
Computers think in mutually exclusive states. Computers have very hard time when there's ambiguity. So from a design point of view, the more you design things in very clear states, you are logged in, you are not logged in. You have this item favorited, you don't have this item favorited. You're looking at this specific item, you're looking at a list of items. The more you design things in mutually exclusive states, application states, the easier it's going to be to code. So, a really great example of this is forms. Okay? I would say if you at the very least don't have some experience with coding, just design forms in a traditional form model where you enter things and you submit the form. Okay, there's no validation, there's no things change as you're typing, like please, if you're doing any forms or inputs and you don't understand like kind of accessibility considerations, you don't necessarily understand, even if you don't know what HTTP is, okay, do not like design your forms or user inputs as you're typing, you're sending. Okay, only those two states. There's no while you're typing things are happening. You are gonna really, really cause a lot of problems for accessibility, for actual maintenance, spaghetti code, all that stuff, unless you know what you're doing. And I think that's one of those areas where, like, keeping things simple. But yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, no, that's it really for me. I just want to say, I put in the link there to how to make sense of any mess, the online version, and then also Schalk. I was reminded of John Maeda again, How to Speak Machine, when we were talking about states. I put that link in as well, and then a really good interview with John Maeda as well, where he speaks about AI. Just read John Maeda, really.
Yeah. Another thing as well, like this can get very technical, so state charts. So, you can go as far as getting into the realm of mathematics and category theory and stuff. Thinking about state machines, don't go that deep. But I do think like a very cursory understanding of state charts and state machines is really, really useful in terms of design. So when I say a state machine is a conceptual model. It's not like machine as in a computer. So effectively, something like a traffic light is a state machine. It's like it's red, it can be green, it can be yellow, and there's logic in terms of how it changes from one state to another. The classic one that gets used is turnstiles. So you put a coin in and it goes into the unlocked state. You walk through and it goes back into the locked state. If you put a coin in and it's in the unlocked state, and you put another coin in and another, it stays in that same state. It doesn't like make that you can walk through more. So you're just reasoning in terms of state. You're not thinking in terms of how many coins are in, how many times have you walked through. And I think like that is the crux of it. The more you think of your designs in terms of mutually exclusive application state and not values, like in terms of how many items do they have, whatever, but like there's state X, there's state Y, there's state Z. How do they get from state X to state Z? How do they get from here to there? Just do some light reading, some very introductory reading on state machines. I generally think like, even if you don't, if that only influences subconsciously how you think about design, I think that's a massive game changer. Because at the end of the day, computers are state machines. When you think about a URL, you think about like, okay, you're on the about page, you're on the contact us page, you're on the home page. That is a state machine. You might not even realize it. Okay, you can't be on two pages at once. You're modeling that as mutually exclusive states. You're looking at the about page. Okay, you're filling in the contact form. You're sending the contact form. You're not filling in the contact form. Those are three mutually exclusive states. It can't be all three of them at once, or it can only be one of them at once. So I would advise you to start getting in the habit of thinking of design as mutually exclusive states. Okay, geez, that was a lot, but like I hope there's some useful stuff in there.
Yes, that's some excellent advice.
Okay.
Really.
I can actually do an entire talk on maybe state charts and stuff.
I've written a gazillion things down here that needs to be spoken about, that people would want to understand.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's a good time for us actually to wrap it up. We've already been going for almost 2 hours. Baby's crying, not crying, wants to speak to Dad.
No, she wants to say hi to the people. Yeah. Hello.
Hello.
Say hello, Leafy. Hello.
She's famous
Aw.
now.
She's
Huh?
famous now. She has 8 people watching her.
Say bye
Aw.
vir die mense. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think let's wrap it up there so everyone can get some dinner.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Thanks, Liesel. I think that was a great discussion. We
Thank
should
you,
definitely
yeah.
do more, and we will. We'll follow up on things that came out of this, I think, as things to explore in the year.
It
Absolutely.
might be worth having these kind of more freeform stuff on a more recurring basis. And having people kind of guests like jump in and jump out, and maybe someone joins us for one or whatever.
There's an endorsement.
There you go.
Before we go, do we have one or two Take-A-Lot vouchers, Schalk?
Yes.
Yes.
I don't know. We didn't have that many people attend. We can probably split it between 2 people.
I would say, yeah. So Tanaya, who got us all started with all the questions, and Nicodemus, who ended us with all the questions. Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, Take-A-Lot vouchers for the 2 of you. We'll be in touch. Joshua will get in touch with you to organize all of that. And thanks for your
I'm just quickly
participation.
thinking, like, while we're here, like, would he be able to get in touch with them?
Meet up, fine, meet up.
Okay.
Easy.
If you haven't, if you're not on our meetup, maybe just join there so you can get your contact details there.
Yeah.
If you just ended up on this video, not via meetup.
Otherwise, we'll find you. We'll find you.
Harass us if you don't get your voucher.
Yeah, harass us. Yeah. Cool. Thanks so much to everyone for joining. Thanks to Schalk. Thanks to Liesel.
Thank you.
And we'll see you on the next one.
Cool. Cheers, guys.